Leaving everything behind and starting over in a new country is never easy. Imagine growing up in a place where you are always seen as an outsider, no matter how hard you try to fit in. Now imagine leaving that place, hoping for something better, only to face the same struggles all over again. This is the story of Mark, a man who became an immigrant twice in his life. From childhood discrimination to exhausting jobs and language barriers, his journey is one of survival, determination, and hope. Will he finally find a place where he belongs? Keep reading to discover his inspiring story. Mark was born in a small, poor neighborhood. His parents had moved to this country when he was just a baby. They left their homeland with hope for a better future. But life was not easy. His father worked long hours in construction, carrying heavy materials under the hot sun. His mother cleaned houses, scrubbing floors and washing dishes for wealthy families. They were always tired, but they never complained. Mark grew up speaking a different language at home. At school, the other kids made fun of his accent. "Go back to your country," they shouted. He didn't understand why they hated him. He was just a child, like them. He wanted to have friends, to play, to be accepted. But no matter how hard he tried, he was always the foreign kid. His parents struggled with the language too. They couldn't understand official documents. They didn't know how to fill out forms. Whenever they visited government offices, people spoke fast, using difficult words. Sometimes they ignored them completely. His parents felt invisible. Even finding a home was difficult. Landlords didn't want to rent to immigrants. "Too many people in one apartment," they said. "We don't trust foreigners." So Mark's family lived in a small, cold apartment. The walls were thin. They could hear their neighbors arguing, coughing, snoring, but they were grateful. At least they had a roof over their heads. Despite the hardships, Mark studied hard. He knew education was his only way out. His parents always told him, "You must study. You must have a better life than us." And he did. He went to university, the first in his family. He worked part-time jobs washing dishes and delivering food to pay for his books. After years of sacrifice, he graduated. But something was missing. Mark wanted more. He wanted new opportunities. He wanted to live in a place where he was not always the foreigner. So he packed his bags and moved again, a second migration. But starting over was even harder than he thought. He arrived in a country where he didn't speak the language well. He had studied it before, but speaking it every day was different. Simple things, buying groceries, asking for directions, were difficult. People spoke too fast. Sometimes they didn't have the patience to listen to him. Finding a job was even worse. He had a degree, but employers didn't trust it. "No experience in this country," they said. "Your qualifications don't match our system." So he took whatever job he could find. He worked in a factory, standing for hours, repeating the same movements. His back hurt, his hands were sore. But he had no choice. Just like his parents before him, Mark faced bureaucracy, getting work permits, registering for taxes, opening a bank account. Everything was complicated. Offices were full of forms, lines, and people who didn't want to help. "Come back tomorrow," they said. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became next month. Still, Mark didn't give up. He remembered his parents' struggles. He remembered how they kept going no matter how hard life was. And so he kept going too. Mark's life in the new country felt like a mirror of his parents' struggles years ago. He understood them now more than ever. As a child, he had seen their exhaustion, their frustration when they couldn't communicate, their sadness when they were treated unfairly. Back then, he didn't fully understand their pain. Now, he was living it himself. At work, Mark was just another immigrant doing a job nobody else wanted. His coworkers spoke in a language he struggled to follow. They didn't make fun of him, but they didn't include him either. He was invisible again. During breaks, he sat alone, eating his lunch in silence. He wanted to talk, to be part of the group, but he was afraid of saying something wrong. Outside of work, things were not much better. Finding a good apartment was difficult. Many landlords refused to rent to immigrants. "No rental history in this country," they said. "We prefer locals." The only places available were small, old, and expensive. Mark had no choice but to take what he could afford. His new home was in a noisy neighborhood with thin walls and broken furniture. It reminded him of his childhood home. The worst part was the loneliness. In his first country, at least, he had family. Here, he was truly alone. He missed speaking in his native language. He missed the food his mother used to cook. He missed feeling like he belonged somewhere. Some nights, he wondered if he had made the wrong decision, but he couldn't go back. He had to make this work. Slowly, things began to change. Mark practiced the language every day. He listened to people, repeated words, and forced himself to speak, even when he was embarrassed. He also took classes at night, studying hard after long hours at work. It was exhausting, but he knew it was necessary. One day, he finally found a better job. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step up. His boss saw his hard work and gave him more responsibilities. He was still an immigrant, still a foreigner, but for the first time, someone valued him for his skills. Years passed. Mark built a new life for himself. He made friends, found a better apartment, and even started helping other immigrants who faced the same struggles. He translated documents for them, explained bureaucratic processes, and gave them hope. One evening, he called his parents. "I understand now," he said. His mother's voice was full of emotion. "We always knew you would." Mark's journey was difficult, just like his parents' journey before him. But he had proven that, no matter how hard life was, he could survive. He could succeed. And maybe one day he would finally feel at home.